Hi, I'm Nikolai, aka 56 Miner, and today we'll be unboxing our October Premium box. This month's box is all about ink, a super versatile medium that's a lot of fun. We'll go over how to use the materials in the box, go over some foundations, and I'll share some tips and tricks that I picked up when working with them. Let's get into it. For our surface this month, we have the Arnhem Cotton Paper Pad in warm white. This cotton rag paper is super absorbent and perfect for ink. Our first art supply is going to be the Bimoji Fude pen from Kuretake in navy. This versatile bristle ink pen is inspired by traditional Japanese tools and is a super versatile medium. By using just the tip and some light pressure, we can create thin, consistent marks, or with a little bit more pressure and an angle, we can create thick, varied lines. Quick, dynamic marks will reveal some of that texture of the Arnhem paper, and by slowing down with a steady hand, we can get a more graphic or solid style. Think of these as kind of the foundations of the medium. Here, let's take a couple solid lines and we'll do a quick drawing. Using a slow angled mark, we'll create a side of a feather. That center line that we did before is going to act as our quill. By varying the sides of our feather, we can create a sense of form and shape. Try following along at home, and remember, a slow and steady hand will always give you a consistent mark. We can make these a little bit more dynamic by breaking up the feather sides, just adding a little bit more variance and a little bit of interest. By layering our marks, we can darken up the quill and add a little bit more definition to the plumage. The Arnhem paper is great for layering ink because it just dries so quickly. This helps to avoid smudging, and you can work pretty fast. Here, I'll layer some of that ink and you can really see how dark, almost like a rich black, we can achieve just with this one material. Now, in my opinion, an ink box wouldn't be complete without a gel pen. The white Jelly Roll gel pen is the best one on the market, though it can be a little bit tricky if you're not familiar with them. The trick with gel pens is to use a light pressure. Pushing too hard won't allow the ink to reach the paper, and you can get a really nice dark white if you just touch ever so lightly. Let's use it to break up the outline of our feather and make it look a little bit more natural. Our next item offers a bit of sparkle, and it's going to be the Speedball Calligraphy ink in copper. And to apply this metallic ink, we have the Angle Shader from Princeton in a 3/8 inch size. This brush is great as it offers thin or thick lines, and you can use it to fill in large areas with color. Using just the tip, we can create lines with a little bit of variance to them, or we can create a more consistent mark by adjusting our hand position. By using just a little bit of that Speedball ink, you can create a kind of textured patina effect with the texture of the Arnhem paper, or you can create solid blocks of color with just a little bit of water in that ink. This brush creates a lot of really fun strokes and is a great tool if you're interested in calligraphy or any kind of hand lettering. I really love the copper color. It's kind of perfect for fall right now. You can do leaves or a pumpkin. One of my favorite things with this brush though is actually to create kind of geometric effects, since it just gives us kind of clean and distinct lines. The next item in our box is going to be a bottle of Black India ink from the Sennelier company. This ink is super pigment rich and should last you a really long time. Due to the nature of the Arnhem paper, you might have to do a few layers in order to get that rich flat black that's so notorious with ink. Not a lot of people realize that ink can be a very subtle medium. By diluting some of that ink in water, we can create really subtle washes. Working in thinner layers will allow you a lot more control and gives you kind of some breathing room in case you make mistakes. The main thing is you just want to make sure that the paper is fully dry before going back in, or you might not get those distinct edges. It really doesn't take a lot of ink in order to make these values. If you've noticed, I've just been washing out my brush in clean water to create these subtle values. By working quickly while the paper is still wet, you can minimize streaks, but they are going to happen. It's just the nature of the medium. Now, building values like this does take some time, so be patient and make sure your layers dry before going back in. Let's grab our sketching pencil, the Faber 9000 and 2H for this next technique. I'm going to start by sketching some flower shapes. If you're interested in floral illustration, make sure to check out our video from last month. We go in depth on how to draw flowers and a lot of different techniques that you can use. With my shapes established, I'll go in and lay down some water just to get that paper wet, and then I'll take some of our pure ink and use a blooming effect in order to create a very subtle gradient. Washing out my brush a little bit, I can use the same technique on the petals in order to create a more three-dimensional effect. Let's grab the last item in our box, the Futaho Kaburi number 30 from Kuretake. This dual tip brush pen comes with two nibs, one that's going to be closer to a calligraphy style brush, and the other which is going to be a thinner and stiffer tip, which I'm using here for outlines and adding a few details to those flowers. This is a great tip to practice with if you're new to brush pens. Since this nib is a little bit stiffer than the typical brush pen, it's a lot easier to make more consistent marks, and you don't have to be so conscious of your hand pressure. That's not to say that you won't get some line weight variance out of it, depending on how you hold it and how much pressure you apply. Compared to the brush pen side, there's a big difference in the marks that you can make. Because of the flexibility of the brush pen, you can do things like petals or lashes in a single stroke. For this next technique, I'm going to lay down a thick layer of the Sennelier ink so we can get a nice black surface. With that area fully dry, we can actually go in with our gel pen and work on it as if we were working with black paper. This is a fun technique if you want to kind of invert the contrast, as that stark white really jumps off the page. This technique's really fun if you like zen doodling or just making patterns. Unlike working on a typical white surface with black ink, it's really important that you focus on balancing your elements. It'll help whatever you're drawing just be a little bit more clear. Now that we have a good understanding of our materials, let's make something a little bit more complex. For this, I'm going to be taking inspiration from some traditional Japanese art, specifically the ocean landscapes that are so common in the 1700s and 1800s. We'll establish a frame and some loose waves and a sun with that sketching pencil. Taking our navy brush pen, I'll go in and establish some of the lines for the crest of the wave and use some C shapes to kind of give a little bit more of a structure to that water and how the wave kind of curls in on itself. Remembering to use a light pressure since I'm creating very thin lines. For the underside of the wave, I'm going to go in with a little bit of a firmer pressure so I can get these large segments. This kind of helps give a little bit more of an emphasis of the curling and a little bit more structure to our waves. Taking inspiration from old masters like this is a great way to kind of develop your eye as you're kind of following their footsteps, focusing on the things that they focused on, and you'll be surprised how much you can learn. By laying our ink, we can create a more three-dimensional effect where it gives a feeling of kind of that curve of the wave or the depth of the ocean. I'll go in and add a few more C shapes at this stage as well to give a little bit more definition. We can create a lighter shade of blue by dipping our pen in just a little bit of water. This allows us to dilute that ink a little bit and increase the value range of our piece. This is where I'll go in and get the cast shadow on the top of the wave crest. This will make it feel like there's a lot more energy and dynamics going on. At this point, our waves are starting to really take shape. In order to push the illusion of depth even further in this piece, I'm going to go in and add a background that'll help to lift the waves up off the page. Working quickly and while the paper is still wet, I can minimize streaking with our ink, and I'll go in with our metallic ink, that Speedball Copper, to add a sun. Another common element of these Japanese landscapes is including a mountain. Taking our black brush pen, I'll go in and just add a small mountain in the background, using the stiff brush to establish the shape, and then the more flexible brush nib to give some character to it. I'm also going to use that stiffer nib in order to do the frame of our piece. A loose scrap piece of paper is a great ruler if you're in a pinch. At this point, we're ready to add some highlights, which is really going to bring the piece together. I'll use some dots in order to add some froth to the waves, as well as add some lines to emphasize the reflection on the water. This is also the stage where I'd go in and correct any lines that I feel like could be a little bit cleaner, or to correct any mistakes. We'll add a little bit of snow to our mountain in the background, and with that, our piece is complete. I hope you enjoyed the video, learned a few things, and if you post your work online, make sure you use hashtag SketchBoxOctober. We love seeing what y'all create each month. And if you want to catch up on any of our previous videos, make sure to head over to YouTube where you can like and subscribe to the SketchBox School channel. and I'll see you next time.